Welcome to Practice Disrupted, a podcast where we find ways to create new solutions to current challenges while elevating the value of architects. I'm your host, Evelyn Lee, an architect who spans tech as an angel investor, startup advisor, and founder of Practice of Architecture. Whether you're a seasoned architect or just starting in the field, this podcast is your gateway to think differently about the role architects play within our global community. Hello, Disruptors. Welcome to this week's episode of Practice Disrupted. This week, we're bringing on Kristin Slavin to talk about her career path to becoming the Director of Product at Intelligent City and get her view on the expanding roles of architects within the built environment. As a Director of Product Architect, Kristin brings the expertise and thought leadership in mass timber construction and low-carbon building design to the team. Her extensive experience as an architect, developer, and product manager of mass timber buildings and prefabricated building products has helped drive national building code changes and an industry-wide shift to more sustainable building practices. Her built work includes Carbon 12, the tallest CLT building in the U.S. at completion. So hi, Kristin. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Practice Disrupted.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. We're really excited to have you. We were just talking very briefly about all the many things that architects can actually do. And one of the reasons I love having these Architecture and series is because I hear a lot of very typical responses relative to, owners rep, project manager on the brokerage side, or just a third-party project manager, manufacturer's rep. But I think we can do so much more. And that's one of the reasons why we love having individuals like yourself on the show. So before we kick things off, we usually kind of start off with an icebreaker. We just had your bio in the intro. Is there anything else you'd like to add, a little bit of color that will help us understand your story better, or just something out of left field, I guess, completely to get us started?
Yeah, I'll go for a left fielder. Something people don't know about me necessarily is that I have wanted to be an architect since I was in middle school, apparently. My mom told me that that's when I started saying this, but I only chose this career path after finding out that I could not be an astronaut because my eyesight was too terrible. So I really had wanted to be an astronaut, was thinking about going to pilot school so I could learn how to be a pilot and how do I actually make this happen for myself. And then it turns out biology was working against me.
I do think, though, that if you were young again, like my son wants to be an astronaut, and I was like, do you want to be an engineer? Do you want to, they're sending all types of people
Absolutely
to space these days. So
I have not given up hope for myself.
I was going to say, there's still opportunity for you yet, even given the eyesight. And there's definitely, we had a conversation with Melody Yashar about extraterrestrial architecture and the realities of that. So I feel like there's still hope for you yet. You can combine the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
I would love to talk about your career path in practice. So, start wherever you think is most comfortable. But I think we all started going to school, like architecture school together. I don't want to tell your story. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your career path?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to school just like any other architect. I did it actually a little faster than normal. I graduated undergrad in 3 years and went straight into grad school rather than taking a year off to work or gain some experience there. Just knowing myself, I was in study mode, and that's kind of where I needed to stay in order to just get it
3 years seems pretty intense, considering how intense any architecture program is.
Yeah. My sort of general ed classes in the summers and then crammed my semesters full of architecture. It didn't help that I was going to school in West Texas for undergrad, and that was not the place for me. That's not where I belonged. So
got it.
Yeah. Heads down, just working my way through. I think my most productive and actually highest scoring term, I had 21 credits that term. It was insane. But yeah, so I stayed in that focus mode and really, went through architecture school with the full goal of being licensed and doing, architecture for the rest of my career. And I, really enjoyed design and doing everything that we were doing in school. And when I came out, I went into, doing my AREs and getting my internships and stuff and did get licensed. So I am licensed in Oregon. But what I found out through that experience after kind of I started in more traditional firms, sort of both large and mid-scale firms in Portland, and learned a lot there, and really understood more about the business of architecture and how decisions get made in projects, how decisions get made within firms, and how the career path actually progresses and not just the
Right.
romantic idea that we all have when we're in school about it. And realized that traditional practice probably was not where I was going to be most fulfilled. Yeah, so a few years out of school, I went to go work for a firm called Path Architecture, or also known as Kaiser Path in Portland, and that firm was great because we were doing development, design, and construction in-house with a really small team. We were like, 5, 6, 7 people at any given time. So it was a lot of responsibility for a very small team. And Ben Kaiser, the owner of the company, really, for better or for worse, gave me a lot of rope and sort of expected that everyone could figure stuff out on their own. And so therefore we got a lot of sort of, freedom and ownership over the work we were doing. And, he's definitely not a micromanager. And that is the type of environment that I really thrived in, was, you know, going into the deep end, figure it out, make stuff work, and then, just kind of high risk, high reward situation, but also in a place where we were able to make decisions based off of our own values because we were the developer on the projects. And so that was a totally different type of practice than the traditional method of, architects are working for developers and sort of half the time against the GC. Like, we were all sitting in the same room working together and working towards the same goals. And I think that was really, really good for me to understand there could be a different way of even doing traditional projects. Yeah, so that's kind of where it all started. My, diversion from the traditional path. From there, we did mass timber. We really sort of dove into that and learned a ton and drank our own Kool-Aid and really believed in the sustainability benefits of building with renewable materials and natural materials and all of the benefits that could lead for human health and happiness. And it was really wonderful, like having that amount of responsibility and control over projects. I think really led to some really great work and an outsized impact for the size of firm that we were, and the scale of projects that we were doing. We ended up setting code precedent nationally, and yeah, kind of making waves in the industry that we didn't even necessarily intend to make. We were just trying to go about doing good work.
I can see the gears of a few of I mean, I know some small firm leaders out there that like really want to be more progressive, and they're like, I can just see them asking, how did they fit all of that into a practice of that size? So absolutely.
I think there's actually a lot of power in small firms, because small teams, it's a lot of every project is a lot of work, and it's kind of a miracle that anything gets built because it's so complicated. But I think small teams can be really efficient, and I think we often in the traditional practice of architecture maybe underestimate people's capabilities and sort of try to hold things more tightly than we need to sometimes. And I think if you can give people the freedom to explore and grow within their role or even outside of their role, people will surprise you. And so I think there's a lot of power in that.
I also think there's kind of a forcing mechanism, right, with a firm that size where you can't just do one thing. You have
Yeah,
to kind of,
no.
everyone has to kind of do all the things all the time. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then from there, I went to go work at Sidewalk Labs, which was an Alphabet company. We were doing prefab mass timber manufacturing. So I sort of pivoted even further away from architecture and into really product design and product management of prefab, building materials, and all using mass timber, all with an eye towards sustainability. I also led all of our sustainability work within that specific team, Sidewalk Labs, and the goal was really to reduce the complexity in projects because it is really hard to get anything built. And we just really believe that in order to make a scalable impact and sustainability, we needed to sort of simplify the way that we go about building buildings. And so taking a prefab approach really, changed the way that I was thinking about projects. And now everything that I do is like, how do I systematize this? How do I actually define with measurable parameters, everything that I can about any given project or product or building system. What are we doing that we can simplify and try to repeat as much as possible, at least the approach, if not the actual, exact geometry of the thing that we're doing. And that also, all of that prefab work at Sidewalk also led me to Intelligent City, where I am now as director of product. And so my day-to-day job is really predefining as much as I can about very high quality sustainable housing before it even hits a project status. And that means working with our building systems team to make sure that everything that we're making on our factory floor is enabling really good housing for people. But also, it's sort of taking a lot of what we learn intuitively in architectural school and a lot of what we are starting to do more with a lot of the well standards and other sort of sustainability standards, and starting to measure the impacts on human health and on carbon and things like that, and really just trying to get granular with what it means to have good housing. What does that mean for light levels in your unit? Should we have a minimum standard? What is our air change per hour or per minute using natural ventilation? Like, how do we actually start to define, using numbers and data, good housing, so that we don't have to actually take that from a blank piece of paper and hope that we can create something out of it based off of any given site.
So, in the move from Kaiser Group and Path Architecture to Sidewalk Labs, you adopted this new title called Product Manager. And I do think that there is an opportunity for architects to go from this project manager role into a kind of a product manager role. Can you talk to us just about the nuances or even the similarities of what those type of roles entail?
Yeah, I mean, I was really lucky at Sidewalk Labs, which was an Alphabet company. It was heavily, obviously, influenced by Google. And there were a lot of other products that we were developing within the company that I wasn't part of, that were all digital products, not all, but heavily digital. And so I actually got to learn from people who were tech product managers, and they ran like a product management 101 course at Sidewalk that anyone could join. And we learned about how, in the tech world, product managers actually operate. And my biggest takeaways were, there are a lot of similarities between what we do with project management in architecture and what product management is generally. And I think there's a lot of skills that we learn in school and that we gain through practice that are really, really applicable to that, and and really allow like a good transition and use of skills into this other totally different type of work. But the biggest takeaways for me was that in product management, it's a lot more methodical upfront about doing product market fit research, sort of testing your assumptions. As a product manager, you're the person that cares the most about that product. You are fighting for it all the time. You are, you're fighting for your team and their resources, and it's really kind of about getting into the nitty-gritty of what is this thing that we are delivering to who, for what, like exactly what are we making here. And it's not, in architecture, I think typically a developer is coming to us and saying, hey, I want an office building and it's 5 stories, and maybe it's a spec building, or maybe it's for a build to suit tenant, but it needs to kind of work and be flexible over time. And our clients are the developers. But in product management, the end user is who you're designing for. I think it's really like, who's going to be using this thing so that it has good product market fit, so that it sells. And then in the world of what I'm doing in Intelligent City, our client is still the developer, but we've designed everything for the end user so that there's a clear demand on the market side for the buildings that we're making and the products that we're making. And so being really targeted about what geographies we're going into, what parameters we have to define in advance before we build any buildings. Yeah, a lot of that sort of upfront work that product managers do that architects don't necessarily do to that level of sort of discipline, I would say. And then, of course, the product, like the idea is that it's selling more than once. So you're not building a bespoke building and then it's done and you're walking away from it. Like, you are building something, a product that can be sold over and over again and is scalable and is widely desirable, and sort of has to be a little bit more broad in what the market you're trying to hit, but also more specific in like exactly what you're targeting and defining everything up front.
I also wanted to take an opportunity for you to just dive a little bit deeper in Intelligent City and what Intelligent City is as a company so people can understand kind of this role that you are currently in now. So tell us about Intelligent City.
Yeah, so Intelligent City, we're a housing provider using prefab mass timber building components that we manufacture up outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. We have an in-house architectural team, so we can take projects all the way from conception through full design, and then into manufacturing and installation of essentially the superstructure and envelope of the building, core and shell. So we make the structure, including columns and integrated floor cassettes with integrated mechanical and electrical, as well as an envelope panel system that is essentially a unitized curtain wall, but using mass timber as the structural base and designed to Passive House standards. So what we are trying to do is use our platform, which is our building systems and the software that supports that, to scale high quality, sustainable housing across North America using a prefab approach.
What is the history of the founders of Intelligent City? Did they come from general contracting? Like, where did they get this idea to develop the firm or the company?
The founders are actually both architects. So it came out of, an architectural practice. The architecture firm that's associated with Intelligent City, LWPAC, is actually their original business. They started that 25 plus years ago at this point. And they were doing traditional architecture through that practice and realizing, for a couple of reasons, that the way that we were building wasn't really working very well for a lot of people. And part of that was they designed and were going to build or wanted to build housing that they then moved into and the offices in currently. And the impetus for actually this whole thing was really that the transit company in Vancouver said, you have essentially 36 hours to build your building because we need to move the bus line, and the bus line is run off of electrical power, and the electrical lines are in the street and they're too close to your lot line to get a crane there. So if we need to move the power lines for the buses, we only have a short window. It can only be done over the weekend, and it's really expensive. So you're going to either have to move it a bunch and pay a lot of money to move it a lot of times over the weekends, or you're going to have to build the building in 36 hours. And so they were like, okay, challenge accepted. Let's figure out how to do this, which led them to modular construction and building everything off of site and then bringing it in and setting it in place over the course of a 36-hour window. So yeah, that's kind of how it kicked off. The company, until they couldn't really find a company that could do what they wanted to do, so they started Intelligent City to make it themselves. And at that time, it was a volumetric modular factory. They were building these modules offsite, and they got the building built in that weekend, essentially after everything was pre-made in the factory. So that was 10 or more years ago at this point. And over the last 5-6 years, a lot of code has changed around mass timber. They wanted to scale the Intelligent City company and the prefab and modular, seeing how well it worked the first time. They wanted to scale that, but understood that they couldn't really do that with stick built over a certain scale, and also really believed in this urban infill sort of typology that existed. And there's a lot of zoning around that allows you to go 6+ stories, but concrete's really expensive unless you're doing a tower. And so there's this kind of, missing middle in a different sense than it's typically used. Missing middle, like mid-scale housing, that's sort of the 6 to 18 stories. So with the code changes with mass timber, understanding some of the challenges that they had using the volumetric modular with shipping and just kind of shipping air and what that does to limitations on your range, they sort of retooled the company and said, all right, we're going to do flat pack prefab instead of volumetric modular. We're going to switch to mass timber so that we can go up to 18 stories, and we're really going to do this as more of like an urban infill type of company that we're focused on. And that's where it is today.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I wanted to ask that, so the follow-up question to that really then is how do they or how do you identify as an intelligent city in terms of what type of company you are? So Icon, for instance, they have their roots in general contracting. So I'm actually really excited to hear that Intelligent City kind of has their roots in architecture, but they identify kind of as this construction technologies company. as the evolution of what they're doing with 3D printing. But they're doing a lot more than, right, just the 3D printing. So how does Intelligent City tend to self-identify?
Yeah, I mean, I think we identify more as like a housing innovation company. We're specifically focused on housing. We are not a parts manufacturer, so we're not just selling, ideally, we're not just selling off, floor cassettes to projects that need some kind of structure, right? It's more integrated. And it's a good segue into a bit of like what the definition of product is, because that changes depending on what company you're talking to, or even, what team within the company you might be talking to. And for us at Intelligent City, the full housing solution, the full building is the product. It's not just the floor cassette or the facade panel or the columns. Those are just the building systems that allow us to do this housing. So I think, where we might be different than other companies is we're not really just focused on the construction. We're focused on the design and the quality of the space, and driving down costs through, good design, wherever we can holistically, even if we're not making it. There's, a ton of stuff that we don't make, we don't install in the building, but we still care deeply about, both for the integration within our parts, because we do have integrated systems, mechanical, electrical systems in our floor cassettes, but also because thinking through this in advance and really knowing exactly which levers to pull to get that 50 square feet in your apartment to work better, so that it's a more usable space, and maybe you can get an office out of it or something like that. Like those types of things are really where our focus is, and the technology enables that.
So can you tell me then, or tell our audience, our listeners, what does your day-to-day look like? And is that really a question that you can answer, or is it, ever evolving and changing, and just kind of filling like the gaps where you need to fill things?
It does change day to day. I am trying to be more focused about what my day looks like, because I think as architects, we can fit in a lot of places and kind of help in a lot of areas. So that role of like firefighting within a team or a project sort of comes naturally to us. So I'm trying to not be that reactionary about the work that's happening, and keep my view a little bit forward thinking, as far as what am I doing now that will obviously help what's happening in the team now, but also set up a system so that in the future, this is not something that we have to worry about so much. Yeah, it depends on the day. I mean, I have a lot of meetings, of course, everybody does now, but my meetings are with clients. Sometimes they are with our internal team. We have, discrete teams that are either the architectural team or the building systems team, who's really focused on, developing our prefab building parts to, a very minute level of detail, or the software team to understand like how can we actually take some of this design thinking and put it into our code, so that we're not having to do a bunch of brain damage to figure out things that no one really cares about. Like we just need it to be a repeatable, manufacturable thing. And it does not matter if the cladding profile is 9.25 inches or 9.5 inches, whatever works best for, the placement of windows within the unit, and things like that. And so how do we automate that, right? Like how do we create these systems and sort of softwares around us that can help reduce some of those tension points within the design process? And then outside of meetings, it could look anything like putting together baseline buildings for our products to really give, an off-the-shelf solution. If somebody has a lot that generally fits the dimensions of one of our baseline products, they could just buy it. Or, like I said, like doing a lot of the definition work. So I actually, something that product managers do is write product requirement documents, which is not something we do in architecture. And so I've got, PRDs going for our housing solutions, and really trying to get down to everything that we need to define about like what are all the requirements for these products, these housing products. Yeah, it could be costing, like doing a lot of, costing both within our own systems, but also trying to work with general contractors to get them to bring subs to the table that are interested in working on an integrated approach. that's tough because, they're used to doing what they're used to doing. And sometimes they're not super interested in taking part of their scope and putting it into a factory, right? But some subcontractors really are, because they understand like this is going to reduce the amount of time I have to spend in the field, and that's going to make my profit margins bigger, or, whatever. So yeah, it's a lot of varied work, but generally what I'm trying to do is kind of pull together a lot of these disparate pieces of the industry so that we do have this fully integrated approach.
Is there anything that you miss about traditional practice at all in what you're doing today on your day to day?
The only thing I miss, and it's minor really in the end, is, and this is such an architecture response, but the only thing that I really miss is walking through a building I've designed. Like there's something so satisfying about site visits and knowing every single detail of exactly that property and of that building, and then seeing it built and get occupied at the end. Like that's the best part of architecture. And stepping back into a product approach means that I'm touching all of our buildings, but I am not directly responsible for the design of that particular building on that particular site. I'm giving a template over to the architectural team, and then they are making the adjustments that are required for that site, given the zoning, given the dimensions, like whatever it is. So they're adapting the product work that I've done, but I lose that connection with it, right? Because as soon as it goes onto a site, I don't know every single detail. And then when I go walk through a building, I don't know everything that's happening. And yeah, so I don't know, there's something satisfying about that I'm not getting here. But what I am getting is, instead of that, I get to work on lots of different projects and hopefully make a much bigger impact. And also, I really enjoy thinking through a lot of these problems in depth, not on a deadline of a project, right? Like we're able to actually think through solutions and test things and iterate without having the pressures of, any given deadline. And that allows us, I think, to get to better solutions in the long term.
Talk to me about the internal culture. I mean, you mentioned micromanaging at one point when you were going through your career trajectory. That is a trait that's not specific to architecture, but it's definitely something that I hear a lot about that happens in architecture and firms of all sizes. Because you're delivering this whole systems approach and you're working with technologists and you're working with software developers and you're working with architects, what type of ecosystem have you all created in terms of internal culture and professional development? And what does that look like?
I think the best part of the work I'm doing now is that I have no idea how to do what some of my colleagues do. Like, I don't know anything about coding. I don't know how they do it, and that's so fun for me. Like I can't micromanage them. They can't micromanage me, because we have totally different skill sets, and they're complementary, and we're all working towards the same goals. Like we're not trying to do the same thing, and if we did, we would fail. So I think it's something that both at Sidewalk and at Intelligent City I've really appreciated, is working with people that have totally different backgrounds, totally different skill sets. I don't know what they do day to day. And therefore there's a level of trust that, we've interviewed them, we've dug into their past work, and we've hired them because they're good. And so handing over a bit of trust to them and saying, look, you're good. Like we hired you, you're good at what you do, and I don't know how to do it. So, please tell me what I'm missing, or please tell me when I need to shift something so that it's making your job easier. I think it kind of brings along a level of openness and collaboration that, exists within architecture teams, but we all know we all kind of know what we're doing together in a way that I think could enable micromanagement if the culture wasn't good. And yeah, I just don't know if it's as possible, frankly, when you're working with a team doing totally different types of work that you just can't do.
Intelligent City, you've mentioned several times, as a Vancouver team. I know that you're sitting in your kitchen in New York. So how does that work too? Because there's a lot of architecture firms that I have been talking to lately, even some of the bigger firms that are trying to push people towards the office even more than they have previously. That, they started off with the 2 to 3 days, and in their head, they're thinking that's not enough. So how does Intelligent City collaborate?
Yeah, so I did spend my first year with the company in Vancouver, and so I have a good understanding of sort of how the office works, and it was, my time was mostly in the office, but we do have a factory, and so I spent at least a day a week out at the factory as well, talking to the people who work at the factory, understanding their day to day, and being able to go on the shop floor and sort of like get a measuring tape out and say like, how wide is this piece of insulation actually? Like it says 2 feet, but it's really not ever going to actually be 2 feet. So what is it? Just kind of that level of detail and variation. So I did spend a year there with them. Even when I was there, we were growing, and we've grown more beyond the capacity of either of those locations. So just by necessity, most people are working at least one day a week remote or like at home, just because there simply aren't enough desks. And then, we're just trying to be efficient and sort of thoughtful about when people come in and coming in as a team. And, that way you can sort of gang your meetings up together and do some more like in-person collaboration. My move to New York was not related to me not wanting to be in the office. Like I actually really enjoy being around other people. Like sometimes the only person I see in a day is my husband, and that's can be a lot. Like, it's just kind of a lot of alone time.
Right.
So I do miss the social aspects and the collaborative aspects of being in the office with them. But for me, one, I'm supporting projects across the continent, across North America, including projects on the East Coast time zone, primarily in Ontario and Toronto and Ottawa. So there's an advantage from a purely just like meetings perspective to having me in this time zone and able to meet with those clients 3 hours ahead of when the West Coast could do it. And so there's that aspect of it. But also the team, my team is small and we're close, and we have multiple meetings a week just to talk about product. We have two product team meetings a week, and then I have one-on-ones as well with individuals, depending on who it is, how frequent it is. And so we're just constantly in touch, and I honestly don't think it's hurt being remote at all. I go back, just roughly once a quarter to Vancouver, and then up to Toronto whenever is needed, maybe once every couple months. So I am traveling to accommodate the needs of, being this far away from the team. And I'm sure that will change as various, manufacturing things pick up or slow down, and, the needs change. But ultimately, being remote has actually allowed me to focus more specifically on product work and less on the sort of firefighting that I was mentioning before, because I'm not there. So I can't be the one to help them move insulation around the factory floor when they sort of are short staffed for some reason. And that's hard because it's like I know people are doing that and it's not their main job, right? And I'm not there to help, but also it's given me a level of focus that I have found really, really helpful to getting the product work done, and thinking about this sort of like future facing work rather than the like day to day, like, oh no, this is happening and we need somebody to like help step in and whatever. So yeah, I think there's trade-offs, but to be honest, the focus has been really, really helpful, and just staying in constant communication with the team is a necessity, but also that happens anyway. It's not, that's never going away.
I feel like people tend to forget how much we weren't in the office, even pre-pandemic, right? Especially as architects. There were days that I would be on the road going to site visits or client meetings,
You're
and
sitting at the city for half a day. Yeah.
oh yes, yeah, waiting for school board meetings to happen at like all hours of the evening. So listening to your career path, I feel like you were blessed with a little bit of kismet in terms of kind of the switch from product to development, and then you really got into mass timber, and then you kind of ended up finding this company that's really focused on mass timber. If I'm a new architect coming out of school and I'm looking and I'm listening and I'm saying I'm more interested in going and working for a company like Intelligent City rather than a traditional practice, like what advice do you have for those individuals?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm certainly lucky because I happened to be working on a project that Ben Kaiser was interested in. And so I'm pretty sure he interviewed me half because of this project that I was involved in, and he just wanted to know more about it, right? And so, but in that, like we clicked really well, and I got into this development path that kind of, nudged me away from traditional architecture. And that was really, yeah, I'm really lucky to have had that sort of nudge and then continued along the way. But I think, and then the mass timber thing absolutely was also, I mean, I'm really thankful that Ben is progressive and forward thinking and open to new things. And, he was like, hey, there's this competition, like this guy told me about. It was the Tallwood building competition, and it's, run through the USDA and Forest Service. Should we apply? Like, I don't know. What do you think? And so I was like, yeah, I don't know, sure. Like, that sounds cool. And that's kind of how we got into it. So, it's luck, but it's also sort of putting yourself in situations or in the path of people who are like-minded with what you're aiming for, a bit. I knew when I was interviewing and looking to switch over that Kaiser path or path architecture at the time was like really where the type of, I wanted to try development. Like I wanted to do something a little different. And so that was an intentional move. And I actually interviewed with them and then ended up taking a different job because they weren't ready to hire. And then almost a year later, they said, hey, we're ready to hire. Are you, would you be interested in coming over? And so I did. And so it wasn't like an immediate thing. And it was definitely something that I was looking for. And I wasn't like out there interviewing for a million jobs. I was being really targeted about it. And then even recently, and this is a lot easier to do now that I'm further in my career and have more experience, but also more confidence in my own abilities to actually support myself financially and believe that I have some value that I could bring to teams, that it's not a one-sided relationship, right? I have that confidence now. But when I was looking for a role between Sidewalk and Intelligent City, I was really, really specific about what I was looking for. And I was really open about that. I knew I wanted to stay in mass timber. I believed in the prefab business model that we were doing at Sidewalk, even though that didn't pan out. And so I was really, really targeted. And that came from me understanding who I am and what I need in a team and the type of work that I was interested in. And also understanding that that is a very limited pool of companies because I'm very niche. Like my experience and interest is super niche. And so having that and being really clear about it in my communication with companies had really helped sort of narrow the path to where I'm at now. And I got really positive feedback when I would say, hey, you know what, like this opportunity isn't right for me. This is why. I wish you the best, but I'm just going to, step back from this conversation because it's not quite what I want, even though it's something that, would pay well or whatever, like whatever the incentives were, I just knew it wasn't what I wanted. And I think people responded really well to that clarity and to, I guess, me being honest with myself and with them so that I didn't go into a situation where I wasn't going to be happy and end up leaving, 6 months, a year later.
I think that's amazing. And that too is something, is a confidence that I found obviously a lot later in my career. And I
Yeah.
asked myself, how would I have given myself the confidence, or even how can I give others that same similar confidence and self-worth, and in this like very decisive versus indecisive decision-making process towards what next. I literally had a call yesterday with an individual. I get a lot of calls about alternative career paths, and they're like, I just want to go into tech, or tell me about this strategy work that you do. And I was like, oh, I don't necessarily actually know how to help you until you're able to kind of tell me
What you
what it
want
is that you're really
specifically.
passionate about. Yeah. Yeah. But I'm empathetic to what they're going through because I feel like there's definitely a time when I was not able to articulate it as well as I can now.
Yeah, I think it's a discovery process, and I don't think that anyone could have it right out of school. I don't, well, you might know you don't want what you don't want, which is good. Like not knowing what you don't want is the right first step. So then being targeted about trying things that you might like or you might want and being willing to give different things a shot, I think is really important. Like I said, I started my career at a large, for Portland anyway, a large scale sort of local firm. And we were doing institutional university work and airport work and things like that. And I really liked my team and I was learning a lot, but I learned a lot about the business practice that I wasn't thrilled with, just generally, not specific to them even, just the industry. And then I was like, let me try something different. I'll go try maybe a medium-sized firm. Maybe it's the size. Then if I can go to a smaller firm, I'll find some more fulfillment. And that didn't really work. And then, Kaiser Path was tiny, but also totally different business model. So I was like, well, let me try that and see if that sticks, and that kind of did. And then it did for a long time. And then, it wasn't quite feeling like right anymore. And I was ready to leave Portland and kind of wanted to scale up my impact. So then I tried something new and went to Sidewalk. So I think you have to sort of be willing to test some things out and understand that what's right for you in that moment might not be right for you forever. And it's okay to like explore and learn about what you do and don't want in your career. And you owe it to yourself to figure that out, because otherwise, 25 years later, you're stuck in the same thing and you're not actually fulfilled.
Yes, and I would love to add to that. It's okay to kind of take a misstep too in that exploration process. I feel there's a level of perfectionism that as architects we expect out of ourselves that translates into I want the next job to be the job
Yeah.
without being willing to kind of take a chance, or two, if you don't know who you are, then then I don't know how you would identify what the next job is until you test things out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was at one job for less than a year. Like I said, before I joined Kaiser Path, I was at that previous company for only 10 months. And, everyone says like, oh, you should be at a job for at least 2 years, so it doesn't look like you're, flaky or whatever. But I was like, I don't want to be here and I really want to be there. And so I'm just going to do it. Like, it's fine. Whatever. This wasn't the right fit. It's okay.
So if there were more companies like Intelligent City operating in this space, what does it mean for the role architects continue to play in the built environment?
Yeah, I get this question a lot from architects who are, maybe interested in working with us or trying to figure out what it means for them. And I guess what I would say is ideally, it gives them the flexibility to focus more of their fee and time on the fun stuff and not so much the fee and time on the stuff that you really do not need to reinvent every time, like how fire stopping details work at slab edges. Like, you just don't need to, draw that over and over and over again. It's the same detail. Like, don't worry about it. And so I think there is still a ton of opportunity within what we're doing. And this was very intentional in the way that the system was set up, that there is design flexibility. So there's still a design aspect to the building. There is still a design aspect to the program of the building. And like, so much that happens within a building is not just like, exactly where your kitchen goes within the unit. It's like so much more than that. So I think there's still a huge role that architects need to play in these projects in a company like ours. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to create really interesting, iterations on kind of what we're doing to progress even our side of it. If we're seeing from a lot of architects, there's a very specific desire for whatever, a type of cladding that we don't offer yet, then okay, we know to go do the R&D to figure out if that cladding could work and how we might be able to deliver something better that the market wants, that they want. So I think there's a lot of collaboration that could still happen, and the more ideas that are on the table, the better. It's just hopefully taking some of the annoying parts of architecture away.
Given where you are now and given the company that you are working in, what is your hope for the future of architects? So we talked a little bit about architects working in a company like Intelligent City, but what is your hope for the future role that architects have more broadly as the definition of who we are and how we practice continues to evolve?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I mentioned that we have software developers in our team and people doing a bunch of stuff that I have no idea how to do. A lot of them actually came from an architectural background. Most of them have an architectural education, and they're using those skills obviously to apply directly to the type of business that we're in, but they're doing software development. They're doing, testing of these systems. They're writing robot code and like running robots on the factory floor. It's a totally different type of thing, but we're all coming from, not all of us, but a lot of us are coming from the same educational background. So I think there's a ton of opportunity for architects to pivot even within the space of the AEC industry. There's a lot of opportunity to look at how generative design or computational design could impact your practice, or you could tie into tech companies that are trying to provide products for architects and sort of provide a much deeper level of expertise and experience in the field than just a software developer could provide. And there's so much coming, I think, from a technology perspective, but also, software technology, but also sort of material technology in the way that we are evolving our codes and trying to unify things across the country a little bit more, that there's so much opportunity for architects to sort of like tie into all of that in a way that is, using their education, but more than that, using the skills that they learn through their education for something related or different. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in the sustainability world right now because there's a big focus on it and there's a big problem, obviously, that we all are facing with our carbon emissions and other things. And so I think there's a lot that's still to be determined of and it'll evolve, right? So thinking even about the products we're making them using mass timber, and we have a variety of suppliers that we're working with. But if somebody came to us and said, hey, we have this new product and it's made out of this other biogenic material, and it's not exactly trees, it's something slightly different, but you can use it has the same or better strength properties and fire properties, and you can use it as a replacement, we'd be completely open to it. So there's this iterative nature to what at least we're doing in the product world, that you can actually start to integrate these new technologies, whether they're digital or physical, into the work that you're doing in a way that is a bit different than a bespoke architecture project, but uses a lot of those same analytical skills, design thinking, all of that still applies.
Hi, Disruptors. Thank you for joining us today on an episode of Practice Disrupted. If you like the content for today's show, you can find all of our past episodes over on practiceofarchitecture.com/podcast. Be a part of the conversation by joining me, our speakers, and other disruptors in our community at practiceofarchitecture.com/community. Our social media handle is Practice of Arch. That's Practice of ARCH. We'd love to hear from you, so feel free to drop us a DM and say hello. Tune in next week for a new conversation on change in the profession.